So hi, I'm Grifter. The keynote who's about to come on stage, Nicole, I met 5 years ago. So one of the things, I'm really involved in the community. I've been around a long time. I'm old is what that means. But I am part of the Black Hat review board. So when people submit talks to Black Hat, I go through them, and with a group of other folks, we select who's gonna go on stage, right? And one of the things I get for doing that is I get a couple of codes, like registration codes, that allow for a full pass to Black Hat, and I don't ever know what to do with them. So my thing is always trying to just give them away to, I think, people who deserve them. So 5 years ago, I was doing that. I just got on Twitter and I said, hey, is there anybody who would be interested in going to Black Hat whose company won't send them, or you're a student, or somebody who just never had a chance before and would love to go? And I had a bunch of replies to that, obviously, right? But one of the things, and it's funny because she didn't know this until we were talking about it last night, one of the things was I got a bunch of DMs that said, pick Nicole, pick Nicole, pick Nicole. And I'm like, who's Nicole? Like, how come I don't know Nicole? Because these people who I love and respect were reaching out to me and saying, this is the person that you should select. And so I did, and then Nicole came out to Black Hat, and we met, and we ended up in the same Wiggle group. Now we hang out at conferences all the time, so it was great. It was a great use of a code, because not only did she get to come to Black Hat, but I got a friend. Another interesting thing that came up last night, which I'll touch on super quick before we bring her to the stage, is that she said to me last night, you have no idea how much that affected my career, like being able to come out and go to Black Hat and meet all these different people and do these things, like you really affected my career at that point. But again, she didn't know about all those DMs. I had nothing to do with it. That was all Nicole. I got all those DMs because of who she is and what she contributed to the community and how much those people loved her. So with that, I'll bring to the stage my friend Nicole.
So, first and foremost, thank you all for being here. How are you all doing this morning? That was weak. How are you all doing this morning? All right, much better. Yeah, this is such an exciting conference, and I'm so excited to be here. This community is just amazing, and Grifter touched on it just a second ago, but I really do want to take a second and just thank this community. It's interesting for me to be up here because, as you can see on the slide, this was the first DEF CON that I went to. And so many people that are in this room, took me under their wing and said, hey, let us show you like all the things at DEF CON, and let's do all the fun stuff. And you're now our friend. And, it was just such a great time for me to be, at DEF CON. I was still in law enforcement back then. So it was really weird for me to be at a DEF CON anyways. So I have to tell a really interesting story real quick. Kintaro here, who's in the room here, he ended up pulling me aside and he's like, all right, listen, I know what you do. I need you to not say what you do this entire time you're here, okay? And I'm like, all right. But I'm a little disappointed I didn't get a Spot the Fed shirt, just saying. So yeah, just thank you to this community because DC 801, your parties are amazing, but you all are awesome as well, so thank you. All right, quick poll. We're gonna do insider threat as told by Guardians of the Galaxy. So little fun twist on that. So quick room poll, how many of you like Baby Groot? How many of you like Big Groot? Oh man. All right, you're about half and half. I think Big Groot is super creepy. So I was good with the first couple Guardians of the Galaxy, but yeah, I don't know. And I've got Easter eggs for my team. Shout out for my team who's watching on the live stream. What about The Mandalorian? Got Baby Yoda. How many of you like Baby Yoda? Not as many, yes. I think Baby Yoda's creepy. So, all right, now we can level set. So let's talk about insider threats. We're gonna go through what an insider is, talk about some really cool use cases and case studies, things that I've been a part of. So we're gonna talk about a lot of things. We'll get through some of the major slides first, and then I've got some really cool stories at the end. But yesterday, Joe Grand, if you saw his keynote, he talked about the hacker inside, right? So after his talk, he didn't get a whole lot of hands that were raised first, but after his talk, how many of you said, all right, now I understand what he's talking about. I absolutely identify as a hacker now. So let's get another show of hands. How many of you now see yourself as a hacker?
Are there less?
No, there's much more. Good job. So I was kind of chuckling when, all of you raised your hands. So keep your hands raised for a second. So everybody who's in here who says you're a hacker, you just hit my watch list for insider threats. No, I'm joking.
Not the first time.
That's right. So we're going to talk about, sorry, Grifter licked me on the way up here, so I now have a cough. So we're going to talk about insiders, like I said, as told by Guardians of the Galaxy. But first, I want to talk about what an insider is. And, when I first, thank you so much. Give it up for Pope. So when I was researching what kind of talk that I wanted to give today, I noticed that, there were not a whole lot of talks about insider threats, insider risks. And, having just stood up a team for insider, we were really struggling to find, use cases and data points and just a lot of research on what this really means. And one of the things that I struggled with, standing up this team was people saying, well, we have a data loss protection program. Why do we need an insider? Right? And so there's a lot of misconception between these terms as to what each of these mean. So you have insider risk, insider threat, and then DLP. My team likes to call itself insider risk. And so I say insider risk is that time before you become a threat. So my team wants to stop, the risk before it becomes a threat, right? So a little more proactive monitoring, detections in place. And then data loss protection is really about, did somebody plug a USB drive in? Are they trying to exfiltrate data somewhere that maybe is a little more accidental or negligent? But then my team, the insider risk team, is looking for some of those big use cases. Is there a Chinese government actor that's trying to recruit one of our employees to give up credentials, right? So some of those use cases that DLP might not care about. So just a little housekeeping item there. Now, I'm going to give a shout out to Optiv because they do, they're one of our sponsors today, so a round of applause for them. They do a really good job of outlining, the insider threat lifecycle, and I really like this. So we're used to the incident response lifecycle, which has a lot of this in here. So the identify and detect, report and respond. But insider is so much more than that, and you have to have so many other pieces of the puzzle. So physical security, the prevention, training is really, really important, right? So there are a lot of pieces in the insider threat lifecycle that you need to pay attention to, including, who's going to be on your team. So who's going to be part of the working group that you're going to put together. So think about HR and legal and your physical security team maybe. So these are all, teams that could possibly be involved with an insider risk or insider threat team. And then one of the pieces of the puzzle that is not often talked about is the bias with insider risk. So all of us have innate biases, right? And we want to make sure that as we're identifying potential risks, which are people in this instance, that we're taking that bias out of the equation. And so these are some of the things that you need to think about as you're putting a team together. These are some of the statistics that I thought were super interesting. So in 2022, the average cost of an insider threat incident was $15.38 million, which was up from 2021, which was $13.2 million. They're saying that over the past 2 years, attacks have grown almost 47%. So why aren't we talking about this more? Because we're embarrassed. Nobody wants to, say that they were a victim of an insider threat, right? That somebody actually exfiltrated data. That third, purple piece, over 2/3 of incidents are the result of negligence. How many of you have dealt with, somebody who is negligent? They just stand up a tool, they have all the defaults on, or they spin up an S3 bucket and it's public facing and then you throw a bunch of data in it. We've all been there, right? So these are some of the stats. And then this last one, think about your logs and your detections in your environment. If it takes 200 days to detect an insider and roughly 75 to mitigate that, you're looking at close to a year. What is your log retention rate on some of these? And then what about email? So some of us keep logs for that long, right? But what about your email retention? A lot of companies are 30, 60, 90 days. So if you need to go back and investigate some of this, you're probably not going to have the data that you need. All right, so we're going to talk about the different forms of insiders. An insider risk is the person who has the potential to harm your company. So it could be, your brand, your reputation, actual intrusions or attacks. Could be that they're exfiltrating data that's got PII in it. So there are a lot of different ways that you can have an insider that affects a company. So the first is malicious insider. And this is somebody that does it intentionally, right? And these are typically our government or APT groups, so government-backed groups. And these are the ones that are, low likelihood, high impact. Everything that we do in insider risk is risk-based. So we take a look at how likely is the risk or the opportunity for this person to attack our company or exfiltrate data. So when we look at attacks, we look at likelihood versus impact. So here we have low likelihood, high impact. Now with malicious insiders, this is the progression of what it takes to get to a malicious incident. And you're really hoping that you can stop an insider before number 3, right? You don't want them to get to the experimentation phase of that puzzle or execution or the escape. So in every case of physical information and insider threats, there are red flags. So when you see like a news story that came out that said, somebody was committing espionage, or an IT director exfiltrated a ton of PII and then stole it online or sold it online, or somebody sold credentials, there were so many red flags ahead of that, right? So the hard part about insider risk or insider threat is we're talking about people, and it's really hard to baseline people. You have to predict what they're going to do next. And I don't know about you, but I don't know what I had for lunch yesterday, so it's hard for us to predict what everybody in our company is going to do, let alone ourselves. So this is malicious insiders. Going the wrong way. So as far as Guardians of the Galaxy goes, this is Rocket Raccoon. So he would be our malicious insider. He's sharp, cunning, always getting into trouble, has a little bit of an anger issue, right? So this is our insider for malicious insider. Then we have negligent insider. So with this one This is what I just said. There's somebody that is, always in a hurry to get the job done. Just enable the default, call it good. Big companies know what they're doing. How many of you have dealt with Okta or Microsoft or name the company lately where the defaults actually got you in a whole lot of trouble? This is that negligent insider. So somebody who is actually standing up the tool but isn't thinking about the ramifications. And this person understands security. They understand the policy, but they just choose to ignore it. And on this one, it's Peter Quill. So we've all had a boss like this, right? That's like, hurry up and get the job done. We just need this overnight, or got to stand this up in 30 days. Don't worry about it. Just do what you need to do. So this is Peter Quill. Then we have our accidental insiders. And these people have good intentions. They don't mean to do harm, but they make a mistake, or they email an Excel file to somebody accidentally with a bunch of PII in it. Or they happen to click on a hyperlink that they shouldn't have, or dispose of sensitive documents the wrong way. So this is our high likelihood, medium impact, because we have a lot of insiders that do this. Our company folks, they don't know that they're insiders. For this one, we've got Kraglin. I don't know how many of you are really familiar with Guardians of the Galaxy, but Kraglin is very accident prone, and he is, especially with the arrow here, ends up shooting people he shouldn't, stabbing people he shouldn't, accidentally. He didn't mean to. But this is the person that would probably end up being, social engineered pretty quickly, and would end up giving up creds, right? So think of, some of the MGM Caesars attacks lately. And then we have our collusive insider. So this is an employee that maybe doesn't want to give up information or doesn't want to be part of attack, but they end up, getting roped into giving up information that they shouldn't. So this person, usually it's personal motivation. It's either money or revenge that causes them to be a collusive insider. And for this one, we have Nebula, which is Gamora's sister. She ended up being coerced by Thanos, and ended up being an unwitting pawn in a security breach. So these are our insiders. And then the last one on that list is a third party. So how many of you do incident response? Because some of you don't want to admit it. I get it. Especially for our incident response teams, 90% of what we're looking at is because of a third-party breach. We're not doing incident response because of something that we've had happen to our company, but it's more so, something was breached on the third-party side. So think about third-party threats as, connected to your environment, but they're not part of your company or your environment. And this one would be Mantis. So she isn't a member of the team, but she's embedded with them. All right. Last slide before we get to the fun stuff. This is the pyramid. So you think of the pyramid of pain. This is like the inverse of that, but for insiders. You're going to start with your stakeholders, and you go all the way down to investigations, right? So stakeholders, your program foundation, which is going to be training, policies, procedures, documentation, then access and your technical control. So that's your rules, your alerts. Think SIM, your SIM environment, maybe your EDR. And then individual monitoring, analysis and reporting, and investigations. So as you go down this pyramid, the risk becomes higher for the person that you're looking at. So as they go down the pyramid, you're going to start monitoring them more, putting more alerts in place, and then eventually it's going to go on to an investigation. All right, so after Joe's talk yesterday, I was like, hey, he's got a car with a cone on it. I've got a car with a cone on it. This was actually in New York, so I'm seeing a pattern here. I was in New York for incident response, doing boots on the ground stuff. Was exhausted. This was the last day of the week. First day I'd stayed in a hotel room because, as many of you know, if you're doing incident response, you're sleeping under desks. or if you're sleeping at all. So, had a ransomware incident. I was exhausted. I got back to my room and I see this outside of my window and I said, this sums up my entire week. This is, you're just nuking and paving over top of whatever's there. So when you're doing insider risk, as well as hunting, intel, whatever it is you're doing in your environment, you have to baseline your environment first, right? So what happens if you don't do historical baselining and you've got C2 infrastructure or you've got spikes because of threat actor access, and you're just baselining over that. You have to do historical baselining to really understand what your environment should look like. And this is a perfect example of that. So at Kroger, we call it from farm to fork. So it's looking at your entire life cycle, right? Your entire threat landscape. You can call it soup to nuts. I think Joe Grand, it was top turtle to bottom turtle yesterday. But whatever the phrases that you use, you have to look at your entire threat landscape. And so, this is something that most people miss, and it's so critical in your environment. So I'm gonna fly through these a little quickly. So this is what my team put together. We do a lot of whiteboarding sessions. And when you really take a step back and you look at, what are we actually detecting on? And what do we need in our environment? You need to take a look at your employees from start to finish, right? And where that entire risk could take place. So these are all the different places that you could have risk or threat injected. The first is application. How many of you have seen ChatGPT or generative AI at work from papers or research or somebody applying to a job? Anybody? Yeah, a lot of you. Wow. So this is one of those areas. I was recently at a conference where I heard somebody talking about this, and I didn't realize how prolific it was. So resumebuilder.com did a survey of all the people that submitted applications recently, and 46% of them said they used generative AI to either write their resume or fill out the application. So how do we know that that person actually has the skills to complete the job that we're hiring them for? I can tell you personally, had an interview in the last couple weeks with somebody, and that person's resume was beautiful. They had every keyword on there. And then you talk to that person and they couldn't answer simple questions, right? So it makes you wonder, did they understand what the job was, or are they lying on their resume, or are they using ChatGPT or some sort of generative AI to complete that application? And the same is in reverse. So there's a screenshot on here as well. A lot of companies are using AI to screen a candidate. And what we saw were some case studies where somebody would have the screen up where they were doing the interview, and right next to it, they would have another computer sitting by them. So when the interviewer, which happened to be AI, would ask the question, this computer over here would hear the question and spit out the answer, from generative AI, and they would just read it back to the computer. And when you did that, their likelihood of being selected for the next round went up significantly. So we really have to be careful, who we're hiring. So that human review process is so necessary. The same goes for the interview. So that same talk, the person that was given the speech said at their company, they actually now, which I'm not quite sure that I'm okay with, but they will actually have the person take the camera and scan the entire room, scan under their desk, make sure that there's not another person sitting in the room with them, and make sure that they don't have generative AI up on another screen next to them so they can cheat. Like, wow, I didn't realize we were at that stage yet, right? And then another thing that the person said that they were seeing was deep fakes. So, it was somebody that was sitting next to them that was actually doing the interviewing, but it was their credentials or their ID and background that they were using to apply for the job. And so some people are doing ID matching, voice and facial recognition, whole gray area. Do we want to be the privacy around voice and facial recognition, the room scans? Because I don't know about you, but I don't know that I would be okay with that, right? So there's a lot of privacy issues there. What about the background check and the drug screen? You can do additional ID checks here, check for references. A lot of companies don't do that anymore. And then one of the things that's popping up with remote work is the multiple paychecks. So a lot of people are actually getting hired for multiple jobs. They have multiple computers sitting on their desk, and they're receiving multiple paychecks. And this is one of the sites, overemployed.com, I believe it is, that you can go and farm out part of your work. So, think if you're a developer and you aren't really familiar with some of the stuff that you've just been asked to do, you can farm out some of that, pay the person, a piece of your salary, go get another job, and then keep going. So you can actually do multiple checks when you do a background test. Onboarding, make sure you have policies in place, signed NDAs. This is when you're handing out credentials. They're getting, their EUIDs, their passwords, VPN. So there's a lot of things they're getting in this process. Is the IP and the geolocation matching up with the address that they gave you when they signed on? What about badge access and location? You can do address matching on all of those. You can do geolocation. Impossible travel detections catch this pretty quickly. So these are some of the things that you should look at. And then day one, think about the person that you're hiring. Do they have admin or crown jewel access? Do they have local admin? So if you have Mac users in your environment, do they have local admin on their computers that maybe they can get around some of the policies and detections? What about GitHub access? Do you have detections and mitigations in place if somebody were just to dump your entire GitHub account? So you can put all these people in watch lists depending on their access. And then VIPs, or some companies have specific access for like social media or Google Drive. And this is actually one of the most interesting exfiltration methods that I've seen. It took this person a lot of work. They actually used Google Maps, and there's a section in there where you can type in notes, and they were just copying and pasting data and then sending themselves Google Map links. And so that's how they were exfiltrating sensitive data. TeamViewer, this is another one if you're farming out some of your job. So, you give somebody access to TeamViewer. You're actually in the States, you're logged in, VPN, but this person has access to your computer. So that's one of the things we've been seeing as well. These ones, milestones or reevaluation. So how many of you are actually doing access audits? What about if somebody changes a role or has additional responsibilities? What are you doing to ensure that they don't have access to the tools that they used to? Partnering with your internal audit team to do those checks is great. Are there multiple complaints against the person? So at your mid-year review, the manager should be looking and saying, they're really not working very well with the people are on the team, or there's a significant change in their work history. So did their work just decrease suddenly or increase suddenly even? And why is that? So all these things can be tracked. Finally, third party and contractors, how are they connecting? Know your environment. Do they have admin or crown jewel access? Do they have access to PII or additional data? Geolocation considerations. So do you have a good understanding of your global landscape? There are a lot of wars going on right now, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, affected by the tools that are in your environment that maybe you're now seeing impact to yourself. Yep. All right. And then do you have third-party risk monitoring? So a lot of times with third-party risk and third-party or just insider threat, you're looking at buying new tools, and you don't really need to because you have a ton of them in your environment. So think about the tools that you already have in place to put those behavioral and technical alerts in place. So DLP, if you already have processes there, sometimes you can just bump up the thresholds for alerting. So say I'm not interested in the person that plugs in a USB drive one time, but maybe I am if they plug it in 5, 6, 7 times, right? There's a pattern in a history there, and we want to track that. And then most SIMs have UEBA, user behavior analytics, alerting. So that's a great way to use something that's already in place to get these detections out. Email security is another one. So one of the big ones that we track is like the 1,000 Talents program or recruiting programs that they're specifically emailing your users to say, hey, can you speak at this conference? Or, hey, we would really like you to come visit our university and maybe be an adjunct professor. So all of these would hit email, and there are a lot of keywords that you can use with that. And then the people reporting aspect, you have HR, you have legal, your physical security. So, how many people are actually sending in alerts and detections, and there are threats, with HR, or they know that somebody's leaving on bad terms. You have to train your folks to be able to use you, and maybe you're going to do some additional, scans, make sure they're not sending a bunch of data before they leave, or is there a physical security threat? So partnering with these people is great. An insider council. So you should have all these people on your council. Make sure that you are taking the bias out of there. It's a need to know. There's an approval and sign-off process, so CYA, right? Really important. And then make sure you're securing the documentation because not everybody in your company should have access to this data. So you want to make sure you're securing these cases as you're investigating them. And then you get to the full investigation. So once you have the sign-off, you've gone to the next step, you are going to investigate the person fully. So this usually means, let's look at email. Let's look at, the monitoring. What did they hit from the proxy? What are they searching? Detections have, come and gone that maybe you need to be aware of. Logs and access. So a lot of people don't take a look at their logs to see what these folks are actually getting into. And then you might have to do forensics. So you might actually have to have access to the person's physical device. I know, I'm a little old. I like, physical forensics. Some people just use CrowdStrike or the other tools that they have. And then what about OSINT detections or investigations? So are those people... All right, there we go. Thanks. So OSINT investigations, and then potential for interviews, manager involvement, and then law enforcement involvement. You're going to reconvene the council, make sure that they give sign-off. You're going to look at it for resolutions. Are you going to continue to monitor this person? Are you going to dismiss this as a false positive or it doesn't meet the level of concern? Is it resolved? You've done what you need to do. They left the company. There were no issues. And then finally, the worst case scenario is law enforcement handoff. You're also going to look at exits. So did they leave on good terms or did they leave on bad terms? And some of the things that you need to do, if it's bad terms. We talked about tools to consider. So email security, DLP, SIM, user behavior analytics, specialized insider risk tools. A lot of folks, when you're standing up a team, you're immediately jumping to these tools and these processes that you don't necessarily need or you're not ready for. And when you stand up a new tool, you have to have people that are actually manning that tool. So understand your gaps in visibility and don't boil the ocean all at once. And of course, policies and guidelines. So have to have those. All right, fun stuff. So these stories I've actually been involved in or have had some piece of the puzzle of these. This one was really interesting. This was a director at a company that ended up using a USB drive to exfiltrate data. They were going to sell it to the Russian government, and the company that I was with caught this, and we were able to work with the FBI. FBI was able to go to Italy and meet the Russian agent and the Italian director as they were exchanging the USB drive, and ended up arresting them and extraditing them to the US. This one was cool. So pivotal point in my career where Putin actually commented on an investigation. And I don't know about you, but I figure that's like the pinnacle. When you get Putin that's actually angry that you arrested somebody. So yeah, that was pretty impressive. So that was a fun one. This was another one. I put the link here because I'm not going to be able to do this entire story justice, and it is a crazy read. It could be a movie. But the short version of this is we had an individual at the company who just frequently went back and forth to China. He had family there. He loved to visit. He brought his mom there. And so the Chinese government noticed this, right? And they started recruiting this individual, meeting with this individual, giving them trips and travel packages, and would take them out and show them around the country. So they were grooming this person, right? This person ended up being a collusive insider, but not by choice. So when this person got arrested, as you can see his mugshot there, this is actually in the jail in the county that I live in, is where he was arrested. They masterminded this entire process. So this individual actually lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, worked at the company that I worked at, and they were able to, with the FBI, track this person and the MSS officer from China, ended up scheduling a meet with them in Brussels, so a country that has extradition, and they really had to finagle that one. So it was hard for them to get the MSS officer to agree to that, but he finally did. And once they hit Brussels, they scheduled meetings and, hey, we're gonna do this handoff. And finally, the FBI was, there waiting for them. And they were able to take the MSS officer and the employee. They ended up getting charged and convicted in Cincinnati, Ohio. So this was the first time that an MSS officer from China was actually convicted and extradited in the US. So kind of a cool case. This one was fun. So my team's really good at OSINT. This was another company that I was at, not the current one, but got a call from one of our other divisions one day, and they said, we have this R&D facility, and we want to do a training, and we have some folks from China that are coming over. They're going to view all of our data and see how we're putting this project together. And we want to do this, but at the last minute, they added a couple people that we're unfamiliar with. I'm like, all right, send me names, details, if you have visas, passports. So we were taking a look. Now, Chinese visas, as you can see here, the different colors mean different things. And so the majority of the people that were coming had the one on the far right, which was the ordinary passport. But the people that were just added had the bright red passport. And so what that told me instantly was these people were government officials. And so why were they here? What was their purpose? And so we did some OSINT, took the name on the first passport, And sometimes you have to actually reverse the names, depends on what country you're from, but reverse the names. So was training my team at the time, they're like, I can't find anything, there's nothing there. And I'm like, all right, reverse the names. Reverse the names, the first picture that popped up was this individual shaking Putin's hand. So is this somebody that you want visiting your company? Probably not. So they were able to cancel that trip. So unwitting insiders. All right, so what happens when physical threat meets cyber threat? We get a lot of these cases, and we have to work with our physical security team quite frequently. We have a relationship with them. Think about if a store gets a bomb threat, for example. Sorry. Gets a bomb threat. What happens when that occurs? It goes to our physical security team. They then dispatch, law enforcement and all kinds of folks out, right? But there's also a cyber angle. So say that person posted that threat to a social media platform. So we've got a handle, right? So they will send my team the handle. We'll take a look at, who is this individual? Is there anything that we can glean from that handle? Is it just a fake account? What did they stand up in the background? And so a lot of times my team's able to geolocate the person behind the threat. So the quickest that my team's ever done that, we got a phone number. They were able to identify the person, geolocate where they were at, and their birthday, everything about this person within 1 minute. So shout out to my team. Yep. And then another one that we had, which was really interesting, was somebody decided to post threatening verbiage to one of our customer portals. And it was the website, anonymous feedback, ended up posting that out there. And the team, the physical security team said, we don't know how to do anything with this. What do we do with this data? Because it was anonymous, right? So there's nothing behind that. So we said, well, there has to be some kind of log, right? Where are the logs? Where's the IP address? What can we glean from this? So we ended up finding the logs, found an IP address, took a look at all the threats that they had made, and there were several. And it was basically calling for physical bodily harm to one of our VPs in that district. So looked at it, said, based on the verbiage here, it looks like this is an employee that works at one of our stores. So let's assume that this person isn't that bright, and they use the same IP that they made the threats with to log in and check email, to check whatever, and didn't use a VPN. Within a couple minutes, bingo, had them. We were able to line up the date and time stamp of the individual making the threat, and then they switched over and pivoted and checked their schedule. So it was really easy to grab them, right? So this is what happens when physical and cyber meet, and especially in an insider threat or insider program, you have to have that collaboration there. So here are some resources for you. The one on the bottom, the open source insider threat sharing group, is phenomenal. Anybody that has an insider threat group or insider risk group that's being stood up or is stood up can join this group. And they share a lot of information. Then the National Insider Threat Task Force, FEMA, and of course, CISA. So here's what you need to do to protect your universe. Start small, define your purpose. You make sure you are getting rid of that bias throughout the entire life cycle. Identify your crown jewels, develop the culture, create a reporting mechanism, because how do you know if you don't have reporting in place? Train your employees, and lastly, just be a good human. So the majority of these threats could be stopped or wouldn't even be an issue if we just took the time to check in on our fellow employees. Make sure they're not getting burnt out. Make sure that they're having that good work-life balance, right? So just be a good human. All right, finally, we'll do some Q&A. shout out to the vendors that are out there. I want to make sure that everybody goes and visits those vendor booths. Optiv and Sneak, I spoke with them yesterday. Optiv has some really cool swag, so go hit them up. And then Sneak, love that tool, so go hit them up as well. And then finally, thank you to my amazing team, and thank you to all of you. So appreciate it. Any questions? Couple up front here. Oh, one over there as well.
I've actually I've actually looked for how to secure crown jewels. Is that the official term?
That's what we call it. So crown jewels. But it's your asset inventory, right? And it's just that risk-based approach of what do we care about in our company more? So that's what we call our crown jewels. Like if they were to go down or if somebody were to access them, it would cause significant harm to our company.
So say like, who manages CEO devices and how do you do that?
That's a great question. It varies by company, right? So there's multiple ways that you can take a look at that. I don't have a great answer for that, to be honest. Yep. Oh.
Over here.
Yep.
How do you balance security and securing your company assets with like company morale and treating everyone as a potential threat?
That's a great question. So obviously you don't want to appear as big brother, right? And that you're monitoring everybody. So that's where you take that bias out. And you're not looking at people as individuals, you're looking at people in the risk buckets. So just taking that out of the equation entirely and making sure that your monitoring is for those buckets, not necessarily the individual people. And it doesn't get to those individuals until they hit all of the alerts and they go down that pyramid, right? So just taking the bias out of it. All right, out of time? Thank you.